The time is just gone 8 minutes to 9 as we continue with the broadcast this morning, and it's the time of the week where we bring you Crime Talk, the weekly edition with eThekwini Secure. Joining us this morning, Chairperson of eThekwini Secure, Imtiaz Syed. Imtiaz, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you doing this morning?
Alhamdulillah, doing very well, Imtiaz. Obviously, never a dull moment in your part of the world.
No, absolutely.
Last year, obviously, we've seen those terrible images of all the looting and the mayhem that was caused. And
Yeah,
once again, now we're looking at the month of July. I don't know whether it's a July thing in your part of the world, but
yeah.
taxi protests that have been taking place as well. And, clearly, it's a hotspot, it's a hotbed. Durban is becoming quite a hotbed with these type of protests and also the actions of people who are protesting.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. The thing is, what we're finding is that generally everyone has a right to protest and everyone has a right to be vociferous about what it is that actually affecting them. However, when it causes an impact to the rest of the populace in terms of them getting to work and doing all of those things, then it's uncalled for and it needs to be reduced. So ultimately, we haven't found a real understanding as to how it is that we do protest, number one. And number two, as soon as you see that there's a movement in a particular space in town, like for example, I think it was on Monday. And remember, over the weekend, we had the ANC conference, which was held in Durban, wherein there's an entire new leadership of the ANC in Durban. So based on that, and we're thinking that it was a precursor that we should have been prepared for it. In terms of Monday, wherein we found some protest action, or rather some sort of or attempted xenophobic attacks in and around the Prince Edward Street, Grey Street area. But with that, we found that there were taxis that were striking in and around the Mgeni Road, which blocked off the entire entry point, which is the main entry point into the city. And thereafter, we found that there were protest action regarding service delivery, where a grouping of individuals around the Old Flaherty Road area, where their shacks were burnt and they weren't getting municipality to come out and obviously restore their shacks because there's entitlement around that issue. So basically, we find that once you start a movement of protest in a particular area, then there are different initiations of protest across the city, which leads to the resources of the city being depleted in its entirety. And that's a great cause for concern. And basically it always gives us flashbacks of the unrest when it comes to things like this happening, and we need to actually control it immediately before in its infancy stage, actually, before it actually spurs out of control and we can't manage it anymore.
Exactly. And, I think, Imtiaz, it's not only about the protest, it's about what lies behind the protest. What is the
Absolutely.
agenda? What is playing out in the background? And as we've seen with what had taken place last year, people that haven't been brought to book. And, this is, it seems to be an ongoing saga that seems to be playing out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The thing is, and I'll just refer back to the issue of the Mamsutra informal settlement that had been burnt, and I spoke to it last year post the unrest, wherein we spoke to the issues of outreach going out to all of these areas where they were affected, and we, in fact, as community, had started making it a form of entitlement, wherein as soon as shacks get burnt, our outreach teams and our community-based organizations and NPOs are running off to aid and do all of those things. And post unrest, we come down to a non-frequency of that, wherein businesses are now looking back and they're saying, why are we in fact doing this? Do we have enough money to do this? And how do we now recover? So even in fact, in that informal settlement that I'm speaking of, hardly any aid went off from NPOs per se. And I had a few calls from there wherein they're asking for aid and doing all of these things. And I'm saying there's no more aid left. I mean, the businesses, NPOs are supported by businesses, and businesses are no longer giving as they used to before. And that's commonplace for it right now. And we're going to find ourselves, in a space of wanting in the very near future.
Exactly, Imtiaz. And I think what you're saying is very, very true because the bubble had to burst at some point in time because
Absolutely.
this cannot continue forever.
Yeah, no, I mean, clearly we found that as much as we felt that we were do-gooders per se, and we were trying to bring change to it, but the effectiveness of what we were actually doing was in fact causing harm to communities where it became a thing, it became a normality. that, you know what, if things happen or if whatever, this particular community would come out in their numbers and they'd support us with whatever we need and all of that. And I think those are the days gone by, and it's in the past. And we now need to move on from there in terms of how people start getting aid and services. I mean, I had a carpenter who works for me yesterday, and his shack was burnt. And he came through and he was pleading poverty with me. And he's not someone that earns a little bit of money. However, he had no intention in at any point in his life, being a carpenter, to actually move out the shack. So we've created that sense of normality for people to live in shacks, and we need to start moving away from that very, very quickly as a country, but more so as a province. I mean, in eThekwini itself, we have 594 informal settlements, and today we go into council. Those are the questions that we, as the Active Citizens Coalition, are posting to say, proposing to council to say that how many informal settlements do you have? How many of them are serviced? How many of them get electricity? How many of them get water? And then, in fact, based on them getting that non-revenue service, which is ultimately paid for by 73% of the ratepayers, how does it impact the balance in revenue that we collect from ratepayers in totality? And that's a great cause for concern for us. So there are many dilemmas by which we are faced in this community or in the city per se, so that we can start moving ahead and start thinking about things a little bit out of the box, and not really in a sense of always being the givers and not really getting anything back per se.
Well, Imtiaz, we're going to have to leave it at that, and I'm sure there's a lot more that we can unpack on this
Yeah.
particular issue as well. But at some
Mm.
point in the future, we definitely will revisit this discussion. But for now, all the best to you, inshallah. Have yourself a great day. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Imtiaz Syed joining us this morning. eThekwini secure against the background of the taxi protest that took place earlier this week. But also, I think he makes some very, very critical, he raises some critical points, particularly the one where we have all this mayhem, we have this destruction, and whose responsibility is it to come in and try and salvage the situation and also provide assistance and aid. And as Imtiaz mentioned, it cannot, at some point in time, it has got to stop because resources are actually extremely limited. The time is just headed for 9. We're going to be joined by Zahid Jedward live with the news in studio.